Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here with all of you. Oh, thank you. With hundreds of people who are here to try to improve education. This is especially personal for me because my daughter next month will be starting kindergarten. So it makes me very happy that there are so many people like you who are here to try to improve education for her and many other people. What I'm going to be talking about is education for a different type of purpose, not formal education in a classroom, but education in a village, education that can make a difference for how much crops you can grow or how much disease you can prevent and lives that can be saved with education. But I think some of the fundamental ideas and the use of technology might be relevant. The other thing that's different about what I'm going to talk about is the difference between the opportunities that the people I'll be talking about have from my daughter. Now, my daughter is going to be starting in a public school in Seattle in the US. And I think she'll have many opportunities, hopefully with educators who are going to conferences like this and learning about new ways to improve her experience and opportunities there. But 9 years ago, I started this organization, Literacy Bridge, to try to see if I could make a difference in the opportunities that are available for people who are born into part of the world where, for no particular reason, they just don't have anything like the opportunities that we see. And so I think no matter where you're working, I think the important thing is to be thinking about how about for the child who has the least opportunities, who has the least opportunity at home or is in a classroom with the least opportunity, what can we do for her or for him? So that's what I'd like to talk about. I want to start with an example of what does it look like when you have education to be able to make a difference in your village. And it actually is a nice little story following what we just heard about being able to take your cow, buy seeds, grow seeds, and do something more. Take some of those crops, use it for your family, and some to sell to the market. So this farmer here, this is a man named Felix. And I met him early on when we started this work. And he was a farmer who had always learned from his parents and grandparents how to grow crops. And so this is his maize crop after about 3 or 4 months. And so you can see he's got some crops coming up. They're mostly pretty green. They're not too tall. But then what he did was he applied a lot of new ideas that he learned. And he was really smart about this because he took his maize crop and he divided it in half. And on half he decided to plant according to what he had always learned. On the other half, he decided to try the new ideas. And this way he could see for himself whether these new ideas were really worth trying. And so this is the same maize crop on half of his land, and on the other half, it looked like this. So he was convinced that maybe there was something he should keep trying. Not only that, but his neighbors were convinced as well. And when I went out there and took these photos, I was convinced that maybe we should really keep working on this. So now what I'd like to do is just show you a quick video that will give you an idea about the work of my organization and of this thing we call the Talking Book Program.
A rural area in the Upper West region of Ghana, where most of the people are farmers, undereducated and without access to electricity or mobile networks. The Talking Book is an affordable audio computer. It's a major source of information.
The Talking Book is one of the most robust devices that technological interventions that has been graced on the world in the past few years. It's a multimedia application that helps make relevant knowledge in agriculture and health available to people that live in rural places. people that are the hard to reach people in rural places.
Behind the audiobook program is the NGO Literacy Bridge, which partners organisations like UNICEF, CARE and MEDA to generate messages on agriculture and health. Information is created in the form of drama, song or an interview and transferred into the talking book. The gadget is powered by batteries and they are circulated between the communities and Literacy Bridge's offices where they are charged. Users navigate simple audio menus in any language and then listen.
Through the talking book, we've learned where to access fertilizer and how to apply it to our crops. Also, our farm animals used to die prematurely, but with the help of this device, we know now how to care for them.
The talking book is the only source of information on modern methods of agriculture and healthcare in these remote communities.
The talking books teach us so many things, but in all, I'm much particular about the cholera that's come in Ghana this year. But due to these talking books, we have learned a lot and we have made sure that the measures that we have put in place, we are safe from this cholera.
Talking Book allows its users to record feedback by a single click on a button.
Even with the user feedback,
statistics we have, the talking book is designed in such a way that people can record a message through that user feedback, letting us know what they are actually benefiting from in the talking book. And we can make the talking book available to every family and to extend the program to the whole Upper West, the whole Jirapa, or even the whole of Ghana.
Or even the whole Ghana.
Okay, so hopefully that just gives you a quick idea of what we've been working on. I'll just point on go over a few things, and my hope is that although the context where we work might be very different from where you work, hopefully some of the things that I've learned along the way over the last 9 years in using technology in new places, hopefully some of these lessons learned you may feel can apply to your work as well. So briefly, what we do is take knowledge from local experts on agriculture practices and health as well. And our focus is always on the most vulnerable families, the people that are hardest to reach, that aren't being as well served by other organizations. And we do that through technology. And you saw a little bit about this talking book technology. We use other technology as well, but this is really the main way that we reach people, and I'll talk to you about why. So the problem that we're trying to solve, and of course it's always important to start with the problem, and to really understand the problem, that might seem obvious, but when you talk about technology, it's very easy to think of a piece of technology, that new iPad, or this talking book device that we developed, and to start thinking that really everything centers around the technology and you've got to make everything else work. But of course we know that's just going to lead to failure. You have to understand the problem well and then figure out what technology can help, where might technology actually make things worse, and what else needs to be there around the technology that can really get the outcomes you're looking for. So we'll start with the problem. So this is where we started our work. We're now expanding into other countries throughout Africa and in the rest of the world. But for 9 years now, we have worked in Ghana, in West Africa, and in the north of Ghana, where there's a high degree of extreme poverty. Now, one other thing I might say is that Ghana, as a country, has had a lot of success, and has its income, average income, is just getting higher and higher, is doing well. But like every country, including my country, the poorest of the poor have a very different situation. And so for the work that we do, it doesn't matter which country we're in. What we always want to do is focus on where are people having the greatest challenges. So in Ghana, that would be in the north. And here is the typical way that people would learn about new agriculture or health. It would be some expert comes to a village, and it may be once every 2 years or even longer. And everyone will gather around the kind of the center meeting point in the village, and everyone will be very interested to listen and learn what they can do and apply. But there are a couple problems, and one is that the vast majority of the adults there will be illiterate. So they haven't had the chance to get to school and have the kind of quality education to be able to have literacy skills. So if you're not literate, one problem with not being literate is, well, you can't read brochures. You can't read textbooks. But another problem is that if someone comes and has some really valuable information for you on how are you going to improve your crop production to grow enough food to feed your children, or to recognize the signs of disease of your infant and be able to do something to save her life, that is, you can imagine how important it is to remember these things. Well, you're going to have to try to remember because you can't take notes if you're illiterate. So this is one of the serious problems that we're trying to solve. So what is the consequence of this? Well, if someone hands out a mosquito net, a bed net, and you do know that you should use it, there's a few important things you should know about using that bed net if you really want to reduce malaria and reduce mortality from malaria. And one is you should tuck that in under your bed. You should not have your arm sticking out there. You should make sure it doesn't even lean on your skin. You should have it treated with insecticide. You should check it for holes. So there's a lot of details that are important to know. And so our solution needs to be able to provide education around these specific details and in a way that someone can actually remember them. The other thing is some people might have a completely different idea of what to do with a bed net. And so there's knowledge, and then there's also attitude. You have to convince people to be able to use that bed net for, not just for people, but for pregnant women and for children under 5, because those are the people who will die from malaria and who do every day. And if you can convey that information in a convincing way, then maybe you'll see less of this sort of thing, less of using it for crops. So back to kind of knowledge ideas is that you're often trying to convince someone to do something that is harder than otherwise. And you may find this with your own work too, that sometimes to get the best outcome in the end, someone has to do something that's a little bit more difficult. And so it's important to understand that it is more difficult for that person to do, and to explain that and to convince someone why, even though you understand it is more difficult, that you can get better results in the end. So here, this is, you see a little mound of dirt, and I can tell you how to make this mound of dirt. If you have a hoe that's about this big, which is the standard single piece of equipment that farmers will have, and you lean over and you are digging into the ground like this, and you just go in a little circle like this, and for some farmers it might take them 30 seconds. For me, it might take me a couple minutes, but I can build a mound like that. And it's a lot of work to do all of those mounds. But it's a lot more work to do a raised bed like this, or like this. This is more work, but it will give you far more crops because you won't have erosion from water as much. It's better use of the land area. You can plant your seeds closer. It'll retain water better. When the rain stops for a week or two, you have a better chance of not losing your crops when you plant in this method. So that's just one particular thing that is more difficult to do, but you have to convey that idea. So now that you understand the general problem we're trying to solve, I'll dig into the technology. I'm going to do this for about 3 or 4 minutes and then come back out of the technology again, because this is much more than technology. So this device that you saw As I mentioned, it's primarily for people in oral cultures, people without literacy skills, often without electricity, and often without any sort of networks or access to phones. Now, what the talking book does is it just plays back audio. But the important thing is what audio, and that's what I'll get to a little bit in a moment, is what kind of content. But for now, I'll just tell you it can be interviews, as you saw in one of those early slides, an interview with a public health nurse. But it could also be a song or a drama, or an endorsement from someone who's like you. It will allow you to record your own feedback into this device, which we can then listen to and review later. The way it works is that we just have a memory card. And so the audio is all being played on a memory card, but you can also record content on there. And then there's a USB connection, and as often as is possible, maybe it's every month or every 3 months, someone with a smartphone can come into that village and connect with USB, update the content, receive all the user feedback, and then go to the next village. So this allows, in a place without electricity, without any smartphones or without any laptops, it can run and it can be a good tool for the people who are there and work in their environment. But to update the content, you would then bring in something like a laptop or a smartphone, connect it with USB, and then get the feedback. So the user feedback is one of the most important things that we added in this, is because as much as we thought we knew what we were doing on the first day, we realized we were making mistakes and tried to improve along the way. And even now, after 9 years, we do our very best to provide the content that people need, but we're still listening to what people are saying back to us. Are they saying nice things like, this has changed our lives, we're growing more food? Or are they saying, this is great, but I really wish you could add some more content on this topic. Maybe there's a new disease, maybe there's a cholera outbreak somehow we didn't know about, and we could use some information about how to deal with cholera. Or maybe it's, well, you told me about washing my hands with soap, but we make soap in our village. Is that soap going to be okay to wash my hands? Will that prevent disease? So there may be questions like that you get that you hadn't thought about before. And then, of course, being able to use local batteries, the same things, the batteries that people are using in their radios or in their torches or flashlights. We always try to work with what exists in the environment already. So people will listen to this on the farm. They'll listen to it with their children after supper. And they'll often talk in groups, or when they're sitting at the market selling some of the crops that they've grown or other products that they might make. While they're waiting to sell them, they're listening to devices like this. So I also want to talk about some of the work that we did on this device. We did a lot of work from the very beginning, changing ideas behind this device, working with people in the local community. And one of the things that we did early on was just simply the buttons needed to have symbols, and the word would be spoken in the local language, and it would say, press the right hand to listen to a new topic, or press the tree if you want to hear a message about farming. And so we needed to develop a set of symbols that would be easily recognizable. And at first we had arrows, an up arrow, a down, left, and right arrow, until we found a problem, which was in some languages, there is no word for arrow. There's a bow and arrow, but not a directional arrow. So that was a problem. So we learned. And so from that, we developed a set of icons, and we would sit there. This is me sitting with the person I was working with, who was translating and asking that young woman to point to as fast as she could the tree, or to point to the hand, or the glasses. And I was sitting there and timing how fast could she point to it and which was the icon that she pointed to. So just some of the things, and then you have a bunch of sets of icons that might be, that did well in performance for identification, but what looks nice? It's still got to look nice. If people think your device is ugly or too utilitarian, then that's not good. So we would then ask people, pick the one that you like the most. So as far as other technologies out there, radio is great and is in a lot of use. There's not as much good content as there could be on radio, but the problem with radio is that you can't stop it and repeat it. And what we find is when someone is learning something new, after they hear it all the way through, they want to play it again. And I'm actually the same way. When I'm learning, I often, if I'm watching something on YouTube, I might want to play it a second time if it's a new topic for me and I really want to understand it well. SMS text messages are great if you can read and if what you want to convey works in 160 characters. A voice message on a phone is good. But what people find is that there's a couple problems. One is it costs about maybe 5 or 10 cents a minute to pay for that. And that's a lot more expensive than having a device that with batteries costs maybe 3 cents, in US terms, per hour. So it's many times more expensive. And the other problem is we find that people don't want to hold a phone up to their ear for more than a minute or two. So if you have an educational lesson that can be conveyed in a minute or two, then it might be a very good thing to do, especially if you want it to be a quick, timely thing. But if you want this to be a device that's in a group for people to discuss together and to really delve into it, maybe with a drama addressing a particular issue, then that was why we decided not to go with that technology. So beyond the technology, now I want to tell you about and I should say, my background, I worked for Microsoft many years ago. So I came into this whole field as a technology person. And for the first year or two, I spent a lot of time developing the technology. But for the last 7 years, I have actually spent much more time understanding the program, the content development, behavior change communication, learning principles, and monitoring and evaluation. Because if we didn't focus on those things, then the technology would just be a tool that, depending on where it went and what environment, maybe it would be in the hands of someone who knew all of these things very well, or maybe it would just be another piece of technology that everyone was excited about. It made it into the classroom or the village, but there wasn't a program around it to actually get the outcomes that you'd like. So one thing is that we work with partners, and I'll show you a little graph in a moment that talks about how I see outcomes. And some of these factors have nothing to do with what my organization and what our program is really good at. And so we need partners who are doing other things. I'll talk about that in a moment. We start by, with these partners, we understand what kind of learning objectives they have, what are the outcomes they want to achieve, and then how will we measure that? We never do anything without knowing if we can see whether it's going to make a difference. And then we go out and gather that baseline data to find out. And we'll do that often in treatment communities and in a control group of communities so that we really can be sure that what we see is a difference due to our work. And as I mentioned, attitudes and knowledge, those are two key pieces, and then behaviors, whether someone is actually now trying something new because of what they learned. And then we develop a content campaign. It could be over a year or 2 years. And we say, okay, in this month we'll introduce some ideas about preparing the land. And then in this month, because of the season, that's when we'll talk about planting, and then fertilizing or weeding, harvesting, drying the crops, storing them, selling them. And then in the same thing in health, we may say, well, we know that there is an issue around washing your hands with soap, and there's so many different times to do that, and this idea that washing your hands with soap could prevent disease, we've got to start with understanding the whole concept behind germs. How would we even explain this? From doing our formative research, we found some people said, don't worry, we already know to wash our hands with soap when they're dirty. When we see dirt on our hands, then we will wash them. If there's no dirt on our hands, why would we wash them? So we have to address these issues and do it over a time period. And then we develop these audio messages by training people on interview techniques and on behavior change communication with dramas and songs and stories. And also with peer endorsements, having someone like you who tells you why something would be important to do. And then monitor the feedback that we're getting. So here is a graph to try to explain what I think that my organization, Literacy Bridge, focuses on compared to what we're trying to achieve. So we're trying to achieve an outcome here at the top, and that might be reduced deaths from malaria or improved crop yield. And to do that, we're relying on someone to take an action, whether that is to use oral rehydration salts or whether it's to plant seeds a certain way. But we know there are other factors out there that make a difference. And then what's going to convince them, what's going to cause them to do that? Well, they have to have the right attitude and knowledge, awareness of this. And this is where our talking book device and our program can help. But our talking book can't show something visual. Now, in oral cultures, we can do a lot without visual aids, but there may be times where we need something visual there, whether it's an in-person demonstration or simply a photo, like a diseased leaf. So we're not so good at this stuff. And I think it's important to know what you're not good at and to be focused on what you are good at and make sure you are working with partners who are good at those other things that are essential to the final outcomes that you want. So for someone to plant certain seeds, they might have to have those seeds. And so do they have the time and money and access to get those seeds? And if they don't, we better be working with a partner who can do that for them. So I'll just close by telling you some of the results that we've seen from doing this work. These two farmers here are the two best farmers in the entire district of 68,000 farmers we work in, and both of them learned from the Talking Book program. And so that was very exciting to see that. What we've also found in this last year is that out of 25 million people in Ghana, I would say maybe on the order of 10 million farmers, the very best soybean farmer in the entire country is a woman who learned from the Talking Book program. So I'll just give you a quick little video showing you what some of those farmers learned. This one is from the previous year. But
to neba na akara ayala me tibe jireba palo nten kan banam bola tiza den lana che o te ye chota ko bonyele ko ta ko ta anile ko powo nan chelle ani tinda ndoba sa ka bunga ta to na akofu
au ta to na lozu ka honwa bonko ni milite chelle won abenya yela hono bonka ko ta to na bi golu bi e maru yiltare banana man ta puru ba isir ka ga do te yiri ja ha ga mamman abe ka hon ta to ron to chelle wono hono bonka a yeni mizie
adonga nuna rachinana o me ye akwar gandana kanga bana ir ajirba palom po chena velen ko bolo yuro chika en suru yel bele mine achara ya mba ho yure wala
ma yure tenganta mas
yele ga ho yi
sir
bo yele ka a chota funan dila ka funla ka bon ka ziya ko bo mula akwara na mo yaga ani aziya ko
mala ko ganda ba monguli tila yele ka ta tiano dana hunno a tusul ku wafla a cha ko lombori a cha ho bi golu a cha don a yele ba mai na ja a mai ni misia se ni ha ko wa e gula ha cha cha la ja amma son tla amalat la na awasa na falon za
barka.
Okay, so now I'll just tell you a little bit about some of the quantitative stuff, because we didn't want just a few best farmers. We wanted to make a difference in the lives of everyone. And so we worked with UNICEF and focused on 10 different objectives that they had. And here are some of the results that we saw. We saw that people were 33% more likely to use oral rehydration salts, 50% more likely to wash their hands, and 50% more likely to use bed nets, and twice as likely to use a new idea, which was using zinc with oral whenever your baby has diarrhea. So those are some of the ways that we measure to know whether we're making a difference. And the very last thing I want to say is that this is a very big problem, on the order of about 1 billion people. We would like to reach 100 million people in the next 9 years. And so we started very small. We were just at a few hundred just a few years ago, and now we're up to about 200,000. So we've got a long way to go. We should be about 1 million people in 2 years from now. But my point is that if you're focused on something of a large scale, you have to make sure that you are designing for a large scale. But you also have to keep that individual learner in mind and understand the context, the problem that that person has, and how is this technology and this program together going to actually make a difference in that person's life. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to learning more from all of you today and tomorrow.